Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve+Poikonen. I am here in lockdown Boulder Creek, California, and I am joined for the first time on Slow News Day researcher extraordinaire and member of the Mikasa Sukasa Network, Robbie Jaeger. Robbie, how you doing today, brother?
Doing just fine, man. How you doing?
Doing all right. I'm glad to have you on here. I've been following your work for a while, and just have been so stacked up with shows and guests and interviews that I haven't had a chance to bring you on yet.
Hey, look, I mean, you got John McAfee next week or something, right?
I'm
just glad to even get on the show, man. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and by the way, for the people watching, that will be on Cinco de Mayo, so get your boat drinks ready for an interview with the Mad Pirate King, John McAfee. That will be wild as fuck. Your research has impressed the shit out of me, man. So if we could, before we get into the nuts and bolts on both the Intercept and on Silicon Valley's favorite Congress critter, Khanna, just kind of, let us know how you came to have this role and what your gig with Nico is all about.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I guess it was kind of just always been a weird hobby. I really got into politics about halfway, I would say, about halfway through Obama's first term. Now, obviously, things have evolved significantly since then, but it was always about, to me, it was always about just looking behind the curtain and stuff. So I really, found a niche, in late 26 or, around 2016, around the time the DNC emails and the Podesta emails dropped. I was just hooked, man. I was digging through all of it, just sifting through all of it and researching what I was finding in there. And it just is, it's kind of evolved from there. I wrote a piece in August of last year about the mega talent agency, creative artist agency, and their kind of web of influence, and kind of tied that into the WikiLeaks emails with Tulsi Gabbard, and that took off. It was really unexpected, and since then, I was writing other articles, done some other pieces. I did one on the Young Turks, and then I developed a relationship with Nico. He invited me on. And, it's been a blast, man. Since then, I've, just been researching stuff. Like I was telling him off camera, I want to make videos and do what you do, but I just spend all day looking through FEC records and stuff. So I never end up doing anything. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
And I would probably be doing more, but I kind of have the same thing where I've got a lot of material to go through before I do a show. And we're doing the Free Assange vigils 3 times a week now. So that entails quite a bit, even if it may not come across during the broadcast.
No, for sure, no.
So let's get down to it, because the Intercept is one of those outlets that you see a decent amount of good come out of, and they're arguably better than half or more of the mainstream publication, or certainly better than like all of the mainstream legacy media publications. But for what passes for independent media, they do put out good work, but they're not exactly independent, are they?
No. And people, I completely agree with your assessment. As I would say, more times than not, you're going to get, or at least consistently, decent work from the Intercept. And not to say that there are not good journalists that work there who do good work, because they do. But yes, when it comes to the thing about being independent media, and I wouldn't necessarily call them that, at least after looking at some of this financial stuff that I've been digging through. I mean, it's long since been known that billionaire Pierre Omidyar has the majority stake in First Look Media, who is the Intercept's parent company. And however, it's not really just him. He's really connected out there in Silicon Valley. And what kind of led me to that was I was looking through the tax records for the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, which is one of, if not the largest private foundation in the country, like probably next to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and stuff. The Silicon Valley the Silicon Valley Community Foundation brought in over $2 billion in 2018, and $31 million of that went to First Look Media. And the thing about that is the people that donate to the Silicon Valley Foundation are people like Mark Zuckerberg, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings, Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovitz, who we'll touch on here in a second. It's just a who's who of Silicon Valley mega players that fund this foundation giant. And the $31 million they gave First Look Media accounted for 95% of First Look Media's funding for that year in 2018. So I wouldn't, whenever you see stuff like that, it makes you feel like, okay, how much are you really being supported by grassroots donors, and how independent are you really? It's a fair question to ask after seeing numbers like that.
It really is. And for, I mean, 95% of your budget is disproportionate, no matter what your job is, to have it come from one source. And for that source to be, Silicon Valley billionaires, it makes you want to take another look at what the Intercepts put out in the last 2 years, and what kind of slant they have, and how hard they went against Silicon Valley. Have you had an opportunity to do any of that, or are you so caught up in the research that there hasn't been much of a chance to go through their history yet?
Well, so yeah, as far as what you're talking about, as far as kind of looking at past coverage from that era and since, and seeing how they've treated the Silicon Valley class and elite, I haven't had a chance to go through that because it's kind of on the peripheral. And quite honestly, I've been trying to really find out more about who funds the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, because it's so massive. And, the only information I could find initially was from a Forbes article written in 2018. And the numbers that were in there were current up to that time, which is the time frame that we're talking, but it still wasn't quite detailed as I would like. I always feel like there's a way to find more. So that's what I've been doing. I mean, it did list Zuckerberg, Moskovitz, Hastings, Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle.
Right.
Yeah. So of course there's plenty more where that comes from, and that's what I've been looking at. So,
and Ellison's been tied to like David Geffen's mansion, and I think even one of the Epstein properties. He's not a good dude by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard some of that as well. I can't exactly remember what it was specifically, but I think you're on the right track with that for sure. But no, I mean, so when I see names like that, I'm cross-referencing those names. I should be cross-referencing those names with the Epstein flight logs, and I usually get around to that eventually, to be quite honest with you. Because hey, man, it's 2020. If you're not cross-referencing any name that you pull with the Epstein Black Book, at least you're doing a disservice. You never know who's going to be there. But in all seriousness, I was seeing these names, and I mean, all of these names that I was seeing are just typical Democratic Party power players. Specifically, Dustin Moskovitz and his wife Carrie Tooner, who in 2016 were the third highest donating, the third most donated across the board, and that's including candidates like Hillary Clinton and her Victory Fund, Priorities USA, super PACs like that, Senate Majority Project, and the like. So, and this is kind of new information. I haven't really been able to release this, so this is kind of like an exclusive, I guess. But we do know for a fact that the year in question, as far as the Intercept is concerned, where their parent company took all this money from the Silicon Valley Foundation, Dustin Moskovitz, Facebook co-founder, and his wife have a private foundation of their own that apparently donated $97 million to the Silicon Valley Foundation that exact same year. So that just lets you know a slice of the pie where that's going. So
yeah, that's a fuck ton of money there, man. And for that just to make up not even half of what they're getting is absolutely nuts. And this is the fiscal year 2018, right? That we're talking about.
That's the latest available. So for people that may not know, so private foundations and 501c3s and C4s, they typically file for like 6-month extensions, and usually they don't have to file their taxes for the previous year until November. And then of course it takes forever for for the IRS to update their website and get this information out there. Sometimes ProPublica will get it quicker. So yeah, like a lot of the times, like in these cases for a lot of these nonprofits, you're not going to see the information be posted in a public forum until well into the next year, probably February or March. And honestly, I'm kicking myself for not getting back to it sooner, because I check these things on a pretty consistent basis. But I'm trying to pull up some information here real quick, just so
for sure
you can see. I'll give you some numbers.
The reason that I bring this up, and one of the things that I've long tried to figure out in regards to the Intercept is in almost a year ago, in 2 weeks it'll be a year since the Intercept removed the Snowden archives, and if you recall, the Snowden archives that the Intercept put out weren't even complete. Like they were like maybe 5% of what Snowden had actually found and accumulated and then ultimately delivered to the Intercept. And we've got, the archives are gone. They start after they get the money. Before they get all of this money from Silicon Valley, and I'm going to mess up the name of it like 1,400 times.
Yeah, it's a mouthful anyway.
But feel free to jump in and correct me when I do.
Go for it.
But the Intercept starts getting this money that's reported in 2018. In 2017, they famously burned Reality Winner. And that was the third whistleblower in just a couple short years that had gone to the Intercept with a story and gone and wound up getting burned. I ask you to speculate, and you can say fuck off if you want to. But do you think that kind of money and that kind of Silicon Valley big tech influence in any way, shape, or form helps direct whether or not a source gets leaked?
I think that kind of money, especially in the proportion that we're talking about, I think that kind of money always has influence. And I will never put anything past anybody, to be quite honest with you. Whenever you see an organization's funding, 95% of that funding is coming from a single source, and that source just happens to be a giant billionaires club of Silicon Valley executives and entrepreneurs and power players. And a lot of these same power players are people in the Democratic Party, or donators or big donors to the Democratic Party and surrounding candidates and surrounding circles. What's the major talking point from the Democratic Party over the last 4 years? It's been all Russia all day, every day. And what's been a major tie-in to that? Another establishment Democrat talking point is the fact that they're trying to tie Assange over to the Russian government and trying to make him a scapegoat. So yeah, like anything that involves anything that relates to that. The Intercept is famous for, aiding Assange and stuff. So what would be a better way than to try to buy some influence at that publication and try to get them to change their tune a little bit?
And it's a little column A and a little column B over there. Without Julian Assange, Snowden would not have gotten his asylum, gotten to where he could get his asylum. Like, and do you know this story?
Right. Yeah. No, see, yeah, I was getting mixed up for a second there. When I said Julian Assange, I meant Edward Snowden. Whenever I said when he went to Glenn Greenwald. Yeah, that was my fault.
Yeah, because it's a little like it's almost adversarial at this point, the relationship between WikiLeaks and the Intercept. And Glenn Greenwald certainly has a role to play in that because he's on the board of directors and was one of the founding members of the Freedom of the Press Foundation.
Right.
If you haven't gone down that rabbit hole, you should, because it's absolutely incredible in And I'd put together a Twitter thread about it quite a while ago, and got in a little trouble for it because I did have to specifically mention Glenn Greenwald. But the Freedom of the Press Foundation started back in 2012. And the reason it came together is because WikiLeaks had their ability to receive donations taken away from them. Federal government completely shut them down and was going after and closing out every single account that they could, or freezing every account that they could so that WikiLeaks couldn't get paid. So Julian Assange and John Perry Barlow, who founded the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they got together and sort of behind the scenes wanted to create a funding mechanism for WikiLeaks so that it would go through Freedom of the Press Foundation, and then Freedom of the Press Foundation would make a decision which any number of public disclosure outlets or the online news sources in general that they could fund, and they wouldn't be caught up in the same sort of like legal purgatory that WikiLeaks was. So that happened, and so Julian didn't want to be like the face of it, so he tapped Glenn Greenwald, and of all people, John fucking Cusack was a part of this from the ground floor, like from day one. John Cusack is a part of this. There are a number of other people too. Let's see, where's my thing? Where to go? Ah, shit. Okay. Nope, that's not the one I wanted. And anyway, flash forward a couple of years, and a woman named Zinni Jardine gets brought onto the Freedom of the Press Foundation, and her, along with one other dude, Micah Lee. So between Zinni Jardine and Micah Lee, there's this sort of overwhelming push to get Julian Assange out of the Freedom of the Press Foundation. And the whole time, Glenn Greenwald is there, kind of, this is pre-Intercept, I think. The Intercept started 2014, if I'm right about that.
Something, yeah, right around there.
This would be right before that. Glenn Greenwald is actually on record defending Julian Assange on a number of, like, way the fuck more than he does now. Enter Zinni Jardine and Micah Lee, and then Edward Snowden is in 2014 now. So the Snowden documents are released. There's kind of a dust up because WikiLeaks should have had them. Like, they should not have gone, at least in my mind, to the Intercept, and I think that history proves that correct at this point, with the amount of sources that they burned and the fact that they don't have the Snowden archive up anymore. Edward Snowden becomes, I believe, chairman of the board of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, and to this day he is. Mm-hmm. The DNC leaks happened in 2016. The Podesta emails happened in 2016, and that's the last fucking straw for the Freedom of the Press Foundation, or at least the last straw for Zinni Jardine and Micah Lee, who basically organized a coup within the board of Freedom of the Press Foundation to not only distance themselves from Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, but ostensibly throw them under the fucking bus, and then hand the bus driver a 20 and a bag of weed to back up over the bus, and then drive over it one more good time, make sure it all happened. Now we've got an almost reluctant Glenn Greenwald and Edward Snowden when it comes time to talk about Julian Assange. And to Greenwald's credit, I guess, he had Jen Robinson on a while ago. They had a great discussion about the legal aspects of the case. Some good things came out of that. But in terms of the Intercept consistently writing about the biggest press freedom trial in anyone's lifetime that's currently alive, they're really not leading the charge on that. And I find it troubling. And I wonder what your take is on that.
Well, yeah, a number of things is yeah, I do believe that look, Greenwald has been more of a positive than he has been a negative over the years, especially on the case of Julian Assange. And I agree with you. Lately, he has not quite been as vocal as he has been in the past. And not to say that anybody is perfect, and of course, Greenwald definitely has his drawbacks, for sure. But by and large, you wonder, is there a push and pull, a little power struggle or tug of war going on at the Intercept at times because their coverage is so bipolar, but especially when it comes to issues of freedom of speech, but especially when you see the peripheral issues that they cover and how they cover it, and a lot of the personalities that they have now. It seems like a lot of people like Mehdi Hassan and others are more interested in being celebrity than they are actually being a journalist. And that goes back to the earlier thing. Now, why would the Intercept kind of get away from their pro whistleblower, pro freedom of press, pro freedom of speech coverage? And if you're going to be if your funding is coming from 95% of Silicon Valley billionaires who, like, again, the Democratic Party wants to distance themselves far away from whistleblowers because they blame whistleblower culture for their loss to Donald Trump. So if you're trying, and this is the same thing, kind of the same tune that was being carried whenever I was covering the Young Turks late last year. And the whole premise of that article was examining their corporate structure and where they get their money from as well.
And, let's pause for a minute so we
Yeah.
can remind the audience why the Young Turks is a cynical, fake progressive outlet.
Well, in my experience was looking back, I mean, everybody knows the big Jeffrey Katzenberg money, right? Everybody, that's the common one. That's the one that most people talk about when they talk about TYT's corporate funding. But to be quite honest with you, my research showed that Katzenberg wasn't even the majority stake in the deal that got them that $20 million. Katzenberg was just a player in the game. Other players in that game was longtime Clinton financier, Alan Patrikoff, who owns Graycroft Partners. He's a big venture capitalist, been around for forever. Yeah, you want to talk about a name that was in the Epstein Black Book? That's your guy too.
Yeah,
that was something I found that was kind of interesting. But and also a venture capitalist firm called 3L Capital, led by a man named Sean Colo, who got all of his initial funding from $100 million grant from Goldman Sachs. So he took that $100 million, started a VC firm, and wound up using that money, made a profit, flipped it, and bought into the Young Turks. And the whole discussion, the whole reason why I wrote that article, and the whole in the discussion that it spurned was how independent really is the Young Turks. And you can say there's two aspects. You can look at the coverage. A lot of people would argue about the Young Turks coverage, just like a lot of people are arguing about the Intercept's coverage right now. The Young Turks claim to be home for progressives, but they've been seen time and time again propping up Elizabeth Warren's and the like. And instead of beating the war drums after Bernie got screwed over in 2016, they just fell back in line and started pushing Clinton. And just saying
they didn't so much as fall back in line, Robbie, as they shoved their way to the fucking front of it.
Yeah.
And I remember watching a couple of Jimmy Dore's meltdowns, like right around that time, and then they wouldn't have them on the main show anymore.
Right. That's right.
I was never look. I knew Cenk in the days of the Democratic Underground website and the Daily Kos in like 2004. And I had a run-in with Cenk when I was covering the 2008 Democratic primary. We've never seen eye to eye, just ever on anything. He got really, really pissed off at me when I called him a cynical quasi-libertarian grifter in like 2006, and that's what I called the Young Turks, and that's what I said your outlet is. And a lot of people told me I was crazy, which I am used to. So it doesn't bother me anymore. But I remember getting shit on quite a bit in those miserable days when I was writing at the Daily Kos, and I'm glad that that's like way the fuck behind me, and all ashamed that I ever was a quote unquote cool kid on the Daily Kos fucking 12, 14 years ago, whatever. But I had Jink's number, and before we're fucking falling way too. I'd like to remind people that the Young Turks is and really has always been an opportunistic niche market entity. Because let's be perfectly honest, man, like unless you solely live and breathe on Democracy Now, there really weren't a whole lot of places for like progressive or transitioning left towards really being left airspaces.
That's true. And like you said, I mean, they've been around. They kind of cornered the market when they came out. Them and Democracy Now were really these upstart networks that you could only get online. That everybody, they were like the underground news, right? And nowadays, I mean, it's hard to tell the difference between at least like the Young Turks. Like, yeah, their production value is pretty good, but their content, is starting to be very similar to MSNBC. And that I feel like, but like the biggest question is, does the money buy the influence? Did that $20 million from Katzenberg and the rest of them, did that buy any influence? Now, Cenk will swear up and down that no, it didn't. And I mean, that's fine. But I mean, you kind of make it hard for me to believe that. And that's the same thing, the same question we can ask about the Intercept. Like I said, when you get 95% of your funding from one place,
to the tune of $31 million, right?
You brought in $32.5 million that year. 31 million of it came from the Silicon Valley Foundation. Now, are the donors going to want something in return? I mean, they're not just giving you this money for no reason. I mean, that's ridiculous. And anybody that would expect you to believe that is just they're trying to treat you like you're stupid. So, I mean, now, do we know exactly the concrete connection? Like, is there a concrete connection between the heads of First Look Media and the heads of the Silicon Valley Foundation, or specific donors to the Silicon Valley Foundation? That's going to take additional research. I mean, the thing about this is that transparency is not something that these organizations do very well. And as a matter of fact, they go out of their way to make their finances as convoluted as possible, so people like me can't put together what's going on. And it's like this countless times, and countless nonprofits and foundations that I've been looking into. I mean, some of them will disclose the amounts donated, but not the names of who donated them. Some people will disclose nothing at all. It just really all depends. And so what you wind up having to do is look up other nonprofits, because the one thing they all have in common is they have to show where they spent their money. So they're showing you they're listing all of the organizations that they're donating their money to. They just don't have to always necessarily show who's giving money to them. So the way you find out that these people are being funded by something else is by looking at that something else, and you just happen to see, oh, they gave this place, X amount of money this year, and then you start, kind of playing the addition game there. But I'm kind of digressing a little bit. My fault.
No, it's all right, man. This is a show that goes on many a tangent and follows many a different little goat path, but eventually we get back around to the thing. And I do want to make a point that, like, I'm not attacking Glenn Greenwald. I have a good amount of respect for Glenn Greenwald. The guy has put out some incredible reporting over the years and gets a ridiculous amount of shit just because of the way he was born. And that is incredibly unfair and a bunch of bullshit. So I'm not, I wish, of course, Glenn Greenwald would go harder when the subject of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and press freedom comes up. But I also understand that he's got a lot of shit in his own world going on, and he's got a very hostile Brazilian government that has him in their crosshairs. And you know, he can't do what I want him to do 100% of the time. You know, and that's just the fucking life. However, having 95% of your funding come from an organization that also donates to American Enterprise Institute, Center for American Progress. There were some troubling names on that list. Robbie, you want to go through that with us real quick?
Sure, yeah. So I would like to preface this by saying that the names that I released on the Twitter thread that I threw out there is by no means an exhaustive list at all. As I was telling you earlier, these filings, especially for this specific foundation, is over 1,000 pages long. And the section of grants that they've given out and listing of those organizations, it covers like 600 pages. So it is a very long list. And I was just pulling out names that popped out to me. And compared to the $31 million they gave to First Look Media, these numbers are drops in the bucket. But, you know, they've given out substantial donations to, like you said, the American Enterprise Institute. For those who don't know, it's like the conservative Center for American Progress. One of their board members, Arthur C. Brooks, is on the editorial board of the Washington Post. And one of their honorary board members is none other than war criminal / ex vice president Dick Cheney. So, you know, that's just a whole bunch of good coming out of there. And they also, you know, Silicon Valley Foundation also sent, you know, couple $100,000 over to Center for American Progress. They threw $50,000 over at Third Way. I'm sure we all know by now, because why not? Exactly. They even gave $15,000 to the Sunrise Movement Education Fund, which is the Sunrise Movement's 501c3. Which, you know, I've looked into them as well, and you know, that's a whole nother story altogether. But
I want you to come on and talk about that, because I've got some serious questions about Sunrise Movement in general.
You should. Yeah. Because it's like I said, that's a whole different show, but yeah, it's something definitely worth looking into if you ever get the time. I've looked into it. I check in on it. As a matter of fact, that's how I came across this information about the Intercept, is because I was doing some follow-up research on my previous findings on the Sunrise Movement, and I just happened to come across that. But yeah, so I mean, this Silicon Valley Foundation, like I said, they fund hundreds upon hundreds of organizations, but it's all of our favorites, right? It's it's the Aspen Institute. It's the, you know, stuff like it's American Enterprise Institute. I'm sorry, any organization, and this is just my opinion, any organization that is simultaneously funding American Enterprise Institute and Center for American Progress, you're not being bipartisan. What you're doing is like you're fucking us over. Like,
well, you're hedging your bets on who's gonna lick corporate America's asshole the best.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's
what that amounts to.
I mean, a Center for American Progress, I mean, is no more progressive than my lunch after I've already eaten it. So, I mean, you know, they took money from the Koch brothers a couple years ago. Like, so, you know, I'm sorry, these foundations or these funds that they're donating to, like organizations like AEI, are not benefiting us one bit. As a matter of fact, what they're doing is continuing to breed the disinformation machine that continuously rolls through our through our media every single day. Like, whenever you tune into one of these mainstream media outlets, you always have to see the roundtable discussion. You always have to see the panelists, right? People from AEI and CAP. Those, half the time, those are the people sitting on these panels telling you the way the world should be right now. And they're forming your worldview. That's what these organizations like CAP do, is they send operatives through the media, through online social media, stuff like that, and they try to influence your worldview to be more establishment friendly, so they can get you to vote for who they need you to vote for when the time comes. You know, that's their purpose. So when you see somebody funding them on both sides of the aisle, it just makes you shake your head, like this is the reason we can't have nice things, because of people like the Silicon Valley Community Foundation that keep people like AEI and CAP in business.
So not to leave this entirely, but to bring it a little bit more home to Silicon Valley. Sure. I want to read you my favorite quote ever about Ro Khanna, and it comes from a guy named Scott Galloway, who wrote a book called The Four: The Hidden DNA of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. And he says Khanna is a smart man, a thoughtful man, but he's not a member of Congress. Nobody in that seat is. That's the seat we give to this lobby we call Big Tech.
I mean, that's whenever you're sitting in this, I mean, that sounds exactly right. When you're sitting in that seat in Silicon Valley, man, you're not exactly, it's hard to believe you're singing your own tune. You know, you got all these billionaires in your ears, and there's so much money going through.
Well, and there was a guy named Mike Honda who was
right?
the congressman there, and he was a little bit more like genuine lefty. Like he was doing a little bit more pushback against Silicon Valley than they certainly would have liked. And Ro Khanna primaried Mike Honda. And Ro Khanna was Silicon Valley's money's answer to Mike Honda. And that's how Ro got to Congress. And when he got to Congress, he presented himself as, you know, a progressive champion. He was one of the first people to call himself a Justice Democrat, which, by the way, if you ever want to go into that fucking group, dude, I'm all for it. We can dive down that rabbit hole any day of the week, dude. We do a Rockfin exclusive like once a week on how bad the Justice Dems are. Fuck yeah. So Ro gets himself positioned as this big bad progressive. And I had called him out pretty consistently because I live here. You know, Silicon Valley is the next county over, Santa Clara County. And, you know, that's where 99% of our big tech monopolies live. Twitter, of course, is in San Francisco, but that's not too much fucking difference. So you found out recently that, and I'd known that Ro was like the richest or one of the top 1 or 2 richest congressmen that we have.
He's up there.
But you found out how he's moving his money around, what he's doing in terms of the market.
All right. Yeah. So for those who don't know the extent of Ro Khanna's wealth, and look, he's a married man, so half of that is his. And look, his response to my reporting, just to preface something, is that he wanted to say that most of this was his wife's property that they had before marriage, and that he doesn't actually own these things. And of course, he used the same reasoning that Senator Loeffler did, who was another senator that got in trouble recently for this. And that was, well, there's an independent agency that handles our money and makes all these transactions for us, yada, yada, yada. But what the difference is, everybody still reamed her a new one, regardless of all of that. And even though it was her husband was the one that was, that has actually had ownership over all those stocks that got moved, and even though another company was the one that were moving those stocks for them, it didn't stop the media from tearing her down.
And to be fair, her husband's SEC chairman, right?
Or the chairman of the New York for the New York Stock Exchange.
Oh, yeah,
right. For sure. I mean, no, look, and I'm not saying she shouldn't have been torn down, or at least investigated and criticized and all of that, because honestly, I'm of the opinion that I don't think our elected officials should be able to own stocks in companies that they're going to be making legislation that regulates them. You know what I'm saying? Like it breeds corruption. It breeds conflicts of interest. I think if you want to be an elected official, you should be forced to sell all of your stocks. And if you're not willing to do that, well, then find a different profession. But, so that being said, I understand Ro Khanna's reasoning for what I reported, but it's still not going to stop me from criticizing him for it. And what I found was in mid-February or about mid to late February, Ro Khanna starts buying up mass amounts, or his portfolios reflect massive buys in Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, DuPont Manufacturing, and a lot of sales of Caesars entertainment, hotels, resorts, casinos, and all of that. And it just so happens that when it comes to these investments, some of them worked out, some of them didn't. But what they showed me was that all of these buys were like days before just the massive plunge in late February that the stock market tanked in late February, very early March, and he got in and out right at the precipice of it. And as a matter of fact, so he bought 87. Now, the way that they file these disclosures is that they're all within a range and they have to check a box. So it's not never a specific amount. So these ranges that you're going to hear are pretty wide. But February 24th, he bought anywhere between $87,000 and $430,000 of Pfizer. And we all know that what are they doing right now? Well, they just so happen to be on the forefront of developing treatments and vaccines for coronavirus. They just got a massive contract with an international pharmaceutical company to help them. So it looks like their stock's going to bounce back quicker than others. Who would have guessed, right? DuPont Manufacturing, they make PPE, or the protective equipment that a lot of our first responders and medical staff are wearing out there. Like, again, these are companies that their services are directly related to the pandemic situation that we are facing. So it would make sense why somebody would want to invest in these. The only problem is that we're talking about a congressman who not only, let's just face it, it may not be necessarily insider trading, but they know more than us, man. I mean,
it's if it's not insider trading, it's trading from the hallway to where the inside, right outside of the inside. These people have an incredible amount of not just influence, but foreknowledge that we're never going to have access to.
They have meetings with people we'll never meet. We'll never know. They hear things talked about. We'll never know. Is it technically insider trading by the letter of the law? Probably not, but it might as well be. And that it does give them an unfair advantage. And in the case of Khanna, he sits on an economic policy committee. So you're in tune to not only what the markets are doing and what they're going to do, but you're also in tune to what the major corporations are wanting, what they're lobbying for, what their strategies are to weather the current economic climate, and so on and so forth. So, to think that you didn't have any kind of extra knowledge that maybe you or I would have if we were playing the market, I mean, that's just ridiculous. And then, just like I said, it's even if you didn't do anything wrong, it just breeds bad optics, for one, and it's just unethical. At least in my opinion, you shouldn't be able to do that, because what you're really doing is, regardless of whether you're insider trading, what the portfolio reflects is your attempt to use the pandemic to make money in the stock market. And to me, that's just, I mean, I know a lot of people have probably done, a lot of these big financial advisors and wealth management companies are doing it, and that might work for them, but to me that just seems immoral. At least you're trying to profit over who can make the most money on for somebody suffering. And it sounds crazy as hell to me. I don't, I just can't get behind that.
You're 100% right, Robbie. You are. And what a bitch move by Khanna to be like, oh yeah, you need to talk to my girl about that, because that's not, ain't me. And there's a company that's her money that, I certainly don't enjoy any of the benefits of that in my fucking $8.5 million Silicon Valley house. I don't get I'm not on the receiving. Seriously, dude, like, what kind of a fucking just loser piece of shit do you have to be to hide behind your wife when a camera gets pointed at you to ask you about these trades?
I mean, hey, look, I mean, that's the one thing that I've been saying, is that it didn't stop anybody from criticizing the hell rightfully out of Senator Loeffler or Senator Feinstein, because I was one of the first to report that she had sold about $5 million of this other stock. And people were like, oh, well, that was her husband's and she took a loss. It doesn't really matter if she took a loss on it or not. As of right now, Khanna has taken a loss on his DuPont purchases, but not by much. But as of a couple weeks ago, Pfizer's in the green from where it was when he bought it. So congratulations, you made your money. But you know, the fact of the matter is that that's not the point. The point is that if you're not willing to be fair, for one, if you're going to criticize Loeffler, we have to look at Ro Khanna. And that's just 1-1, because no reform is ever going to happen if we give off the appearance that we're being overtly partisan, right? So is if any chance the other side or either side can use the partisan bullshit flag to stop taking you seriously, then the whole movement and, you know, any chance you have at reform is gone, because they're not going to take you seriously anymore. So that's number one. And number two is the fact of the matter is, if you're not willing to have these conversations, like, okay, honey, I'm running for Congress. You know, I know you have a lot of investments in oil and gas, which she does, Chevron, Exxon, the list goes on, several pipeline companies, like literally every company that has a stake in the Dakota Access Pipeline, Ro Khanna's wife has investments in. And, you know, every defense contractor you can think of, Raytheon, United Technologies, Honeywell, you know, the list goes on, Lockheed Martin, so Boeing, so on and so forth. These are problematic looks for someone that's billing themselves as a so-called progressive. So if you're not willing to get rid of those investments, if you're not willing to divest those investments, okay, I guess that's your wife's prerogative, but it's also going to be prerogative for people like you and I to criticize you for it. Because I mean, that's just the way the world works. If you're not going to take steps to prevent it, then whenever we find out about it, you're going to get hit for it. I mean, that's just how it goes.
And Rose, I mean, you know, real quick, I personally don't think that reform can ever be achieved, both within the current system that we have as a whole and within the duopoly as it stands. Having said that, it's open season on these critters who work in Congress and, you know, and their spouses, in terms of how they're manipulating the financial world as an entity, how that reflects on the economy as it, you know, gets trickled down on to me and you. And
sure,
the simple fact of the matter is, like, Rogue gets to say and do a handful of things that certainly appear progressive, with the foreknowledge that it's never going to pass, never going to see the light of day. He can campaign on his progressive bona fides as long as you don't find out that there was, what is it, 87 to 430 million dollars being moved around in the stock market, ostensibly at his wife's behest. But it's not like there's no such thing as fucking pillow talk, man. Like,
right.
if you're talking about, I don't care how wealthy you are, if you're talking about moving $80 million in funds on the market, you're going to have a conversation with your significant other about that.
Yeah, 80. Yeah, it was 80 to 430,000. Yeah.
Okay.
But still, I mean, that's still a lot of money. No, I just, you know, but that's still a shit ton of money. You're exactly right. To think that you and your wife aren't discussing, you know, anything like this, like, you don't, to think that she doesn't know when she's an heiress, like she's a million, like she's multi-millionaire. I mean, you think she's not connected to these same circles? I mean, look, it's a typical politician answer or in response to a question. You know, throw your hands up, get at arm's length, you know, pass the buck to somewhere else, you know, make it plausibly deniable, and you've got yourself a ball game, you know. And that's, and I mean, honestly, I'm not buying it, but I mean, do I buy the fact that they have an outside company that manages their investments for them? Of course I do, because literally there's so many. You would, I mean, okay, yeah, you pay somebody to do that, but what you're telling me is that you don't know what they're doing with your money,
right? You don't talk to the person who handles your wealth. Are you kidding?
Even still, you know, the fact of the matter is this. So tell me that you don't know what's going on with your money. Well, now you do know what's going on with your money, because I just told you. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to stop? Are you going to make it? I mean, because look, this is what I was telling Nico. All you have to do is make one phone call and tell the person the person you pay to manage your money, tell them to divest from any oil and gas stocks. Tell them to divest from any big banks, any big insurance, any big pharma, and tell them to divest from any defense contractors. It's really not a hard thing to do. All it would take was one phone call. They can move that money somewhere else, into more sustainable markets, like, you know, maybe some green energy or whatever it is, you know, like whatever. The fact of the matter is that if you want people to take you seriously as a progressive who was fighting for climate change reform and somebody who was fighting for campaign finance reform and healthcare reform, then you have to get the money. You have to put your money where your mouth is and get it out of the mouths of the companies that you're supposed to be fighting and supposed to be regulating, because it's really hard for me to you know, whenever parts of your wealth, your family's wealth, your children's wealth, or eventual wealth, a lot of this is tied into how successful a lot of these companies are. You know, your money is being lost or gained every single minute of an active stock market day. So, of course, we're going to ask questions about how likely it is that you might think it's in your family's best interest if these companies do well. It's a fair question to ask, you know. Yeah, Khanna definitely, look, he could be a leader on the forefront. He knows what's going on now. He could, you know, come out and say, you know what, me and my wife have decided to do all that, but he couldn't even beat Kelly Loeffler to it, because apparently I saw a report that Loeffler sold all of her stocks. You know, no, it might be too little too late, but the fact of the matter is that at least somebody stepped up and at least tried to make the optics at the very. Now, was she genuine? Who cares at this point? And I don't believe she was, because I'm so cynical. You know, I think it's just a move to save face.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. Loeffler has a base that's not afraid to primary her.
Oh, of course.
Loeffler's in a party who isn't afraid to primary an incumbent that they think is you know, losing the message a little bit.
Sure.
Khanna probably has one of the safest house.
Yeah, he's not in any danger
on the planet, you know. And as iffy as I am about Shahid Buttar, I do hope that he gets Nancy Pelosi out of there. If I did, as far as I'm concerned, like, it's all kabuki theater. But for the sake of just knowing for a fact that Nancy Pelosi will no longer be walking into Congress as a sitting member, that make me feel, you know, it go a long way towards making me feel better.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah, shit. I gotta go. I got a thing in an hour with pasta.
Oh shit. Okay. Tell him I said hi.
We're recording for next week, but me and Jason Burmis and Jackson Fax are going to be doing a conspiracy trivia thing for Combo Couch.
Sounds nice.
So yeah, Pasta called me yesterday. He's like, "How you put this together?" My call purpose. I'm driving. You know, and that was fuck. Really? Okay, I guess we're doing that now. I'm trying to clean my room, but all right. Robbie, I want to thank you so much. Please come back onto the show. Let's do a whole fucking thing on Sunrise Movement, because I have a lot to say about those guys, and I prefer to say it with documents along with my, you know, opinions as they are. We let everybody know where they can find you, what you got going on. We put up your Rockfin. I don't know if we put up your Patreon or not, but I know we got the Rockfin channel up here throughout the course of the show.
Sure, man. Thanks. Like I said, thanks for having me on, man. It's been real fun. Anytime you want to get back together, man, all you got to do is hit me up and I'll be glad to come back. But yeah, guys, if you want to find me, always follow me on Twitter at RobLitoFire, ROBLETO Fire. And that's pretty much going to be the handle for anything else, for my Patreon, for my Medium, for my YouTube, and for, of course, my Rockfin. Feel free to, you know, hit me up on any of those platforms and do whatever you want to do. And as for, you know, as for today, man, like I said, it's been a great discussion. You know, can't wait to do it again.
Hell yeah. That will do it for Slow News Day. I don't know if I'm going to do another video tonight. I do want to do a video on WikiLeaks release of the Roger Stone warrant. Not sure if I'm going to get to that tonight. If I don't, it'll be at some point tomorrow. But thanks for hanging out, guys. I fucking love you. I will catch you soon. And until then, good luck to us all.